Welcome to the exam preparation for DP600, Implementing Analytics Solutions Using Microsoft Fabric. My name is Barbara Andrews, and I'm a Microsoft Technical Trainer. In this video series, we will guide you through the essential strategies for taking the DP600 exam. Our focus is on exam strategy and preparation, not on teaching concepts. We will cover the objectives, best practices, tips, tricks, and key points of the exam. This video will also include a lot of visual information for reference. Remember, you can pause the video at any time to review content. This exam is designed for those who are familiar with data modeling and transformation, get-based control, and languages like SQL, DAX, and PySpark. Your path to becoming a Fabric Analytics Engineer Associate involves several steps. This video series is your comprehensive guide to exam preparation, covering essential topics and providing valuable study resources. Be sure that you also make use of the labs, the study guides, the practice tests, and focus on skills highlighted during the exam prep course to ensure you are thoroughly prepared. Once you feel confident in your understanding of the content, it's time to take the exam. Now let's get started. This exam prep video series will help you with three key things. Number one, identify what will be covered on the exam. Number two, gain insight into preparing for the exam. And number three, determining which concepts to prioritize and/or revisit for further study. Keep in mind this series is not a replacement for official Microsoft training or hands-on experience. While it will guide you on what to expect on the exam, it won't teach the topics in detail. Use it to spot any knowledge gaps and focus your time on resources accordingly. In this series, each episode will cover one of the three groups in the objective domain. For DP600, these groups are maintain a data analytics solution, prepare data, and implement and manage semantic models. Each group has a specific weight indicating the percentage of questions that will come from each area on the exam. Currently, episode 2 is the most heavily weighted section, so you may consider focusing more of your study time there. However, to pass the exam, you will need to be familiar with all the skills in all the groups. Now let's dive into the content of episode 1, which focuses in on maintaining a data analytics solution. In this episode, what we're going to do is we're going to cover how to implement security and governance and how to maintain the analytics development lifecycle. Let's get started. Here is a list of all the different skills that you might be tested on. These are sometimes referred to as may include, meaning that they may or may not be on the exam. This list isn't exhaustive, and while we won't be covering every skill in the video, be sure to be able to perform these skills before taking the exam. So these are critical areas to review. A critical point to remember in your implementing security and governance section of the exam is how to implement workspace level access controls. Remember that workspace roles define default permissions for the items inside the workspace. Review the steps to grant access to your workspace. To do that, you first are going to need to be a member of the member role in that workspace. After that, you will need to give others access to the workspace by adding them to the workspace roles. To do this, you're going to want to click on Manage Access on the command bar and add people or groups by entering their name or their email. And there's a lot of ways you can add people. And you can do this by adding security groups, distribution groups, Microsoft 365 groups, or even individuals. Lastly, select a role and click Add. You can also use item permissions for sharing individual items. This is an easy way to give people permission. To recap, know the steps to grant access to the workspace by using the roles and/or by using item permissions. And lastly, you're really going to want to know the 4 roles: admin, member, contributor, and viewer. Be sure to review them. Another critical point to remember is how to implement item-level access controls. This is using item sharing to grant and manage item-level permissions to collaborate with colleagues who don't have a role in the workspace, or to grant additional item-level permissions for roles in the workspace. Please recall the 3 ways to notify someone that you have granted them access to an item. And you can do that via a link, an email, or Teams. Always grant the least privilege permission on the exam, but also in real life. Lastly, know that you can also choose to send the link directly to specific people or groups, like distribution groups or security groups, simply by entering their name or their email address, and including, if you'd like, an optional message and then selecting Send. Then an email link is sent to your specific recipient. What you're going to want to do is really study the options on this slide, focusing in on the permissions and the ways to give access, along with also who can be granted access. Knowing how to implement security and governance is critical to passing this exam. You're going to want to do an in-depth dive into row-level security, or RLS, using filters to restrict table rows to roles. Remember that RLS is applied to the viewer role in the workspace. Know how to implement dynamic row-level access security too, using these two functions, username and user principal name. They will both return the user principal name, or UPN, which is, if you remember, in an email address format. Column level security, or CLS, allows you to control access to columns in a table based on T-SQL grant permission statement. You can implement column-level security on a Fabric warehouse, or you can even do it on a SQL Analytics endpoint in the Fabric Lakehouse. You need to be a member of the contributor role or higher on the workspace, or you need to have control permissions on the warehouse or on the SQL Analytics endpoint in the Lakehouse in order to implement CLS. Note the steps shown here. Let's keep focusing on how to implement security. Now at the object and file levels. Here are some good points to know for the exam. You're going to want to recall that object level security, or OLS, enables model authors to secure specific tables or columns from report viewers and can even restrict object names and metadata. Like RLS, OLS is also defined within the model roles in the tabular editor. OLS only applies to viewers in a workspace and can be implemented for a Fabric warehouse or even a Lakehouse using T-SQL. Know that T-SQL, or Transact SQL, is a Microsoft extension to the ANSI SQL language that includes procedural programming, local variables, and various support functions. Please be sure to review Fabric's 3 different security levels. Each level evaluates sequentially to determine if a user has access. First, Entra Authentication checks if the user can authenticate to the tenant. Next, it checks if the user can access Microsoft Fabric. And lastly, it checks if the user can perform the requested action on the table or file. If you fail any of these 3 checks, you can't access the table or the file. Thoroughly review RLS, CLS, and OLS, and file-level access for the exam. Recall, too, that sensitivity labels on items can guard your sensitive content against unauthorized data access and leakage. There's 2 common ways of applying a sensitivity label to an item. Number 1 is that you can do this from the flyout menu in the item header, and the other is it can be done in item settings. Endorsement is a feature that makes it easier for users to organize and find high-quality, trustworthy content. And endorsed items are clearly labeled with a badge, if you recall. Fabric provides 3 ways to endorse valuable, high-quality items and to increase their visibility through promotion, certification, and designating the item as master data. Anyone who has right permissions on that item can promote it. And remember, only authorized viewers can certify items or can label data items as master data. To promote, certify, or designate an item as master data, go into the settings of the content and select it. Please review these areas for the exam. Note our Git integration features listed here on this slide: backup and versioning, reverting to previous stages, collaboration with Git branches, source controls, and tracking changes or updates. It's currently in preview with only a few items supported, but the list of supported items here is growing. And developers can version items they develop within a workspace in a single process with full visibility to all their items. Recall that when you make changes to a Fabric item, it's important to be able to access the potential impact of interrelated items and how it affects downstream dependent items. So to do that, please review Impact Analysis, which shows the workspaces and Fabric items that might be affected by a change, either by type or by workspace. It even includes a way to notify the relevant people about the change and shows the connection string used to connect to the data source. Please review all the areas here on this slide highlighted in red, and be sure to focus on the impact analysis on an item that you must have right permissions in order to do that. And you want to open the item's impact analysis for its card in the lineage view or from the lineage option on the item's detail page as shown here. I hope you're noticing too that procedures and where things can be done throughout our presentation. Processes are important points to grasp for this exam and are highly testable. Please be aware that you may also have preview features on the exam. And here's one right here. It is the Power BI desktop projects. This is a new way to author, collaborate, and save your projects as a Power BI project or a PBIP file. There are a number of benefits of using it too. You can use text editor support to easily edit your Power BI item definitions. You can use things like programmatic generation and editing item definition to automate and manage Power BI content with scripts and even custom apps. You can also use source control to track versions, compare revisions, resolve conflicts, and review changes by storing item definitions in Get. So a lot of this is based on using CI/CD, or continuous integration, continuous delivery, for systematic testing and deployment of reliable content. Please review the Power BI project features shown here. I'll highlight just a few, but be sure to know how to enable preview features from File and Options in Power BI Desktop and to be able to work with the Power BI project. You can also open the project itself using its folder and either open the PBIP file or the PBIR file in the report folder. Recall too that you can make changes outside Power BI Desktop to your semantic model and report definitions, and that can be done in the Visual Studio Code or through the tabular editor or even through Notepad. Review Microsoft's Fabric Deployment Pipeline 2 that provides content creators with a production environment to collaborate with others to manage the life cycle of our organizational content. In a deployment pipeline, one premium workspace is assigned to each stage, and there's some prerequisites to consider. To access the deployment pipeline feature, it's going to require that you are an admin in the Fabric workspace. Listed here on the slide are 5 high-level overview steps, starting with to create and configure deployment pipelines listed here. These steps are good to know as this process is a great candidate for a test question regarding put these steps in order on the exam. Note too that you need multiple workspaces to assign to the different pipeline stages that are by default development, test, and production. You can have anywhere between 2 to 10 stages in a pipeline, but it's recommended to deploy an empty stage along with the deployment rules. So review deployment pipelines, how to create them and configure them for the exam. Power BI Premium, Premium per User, and Power BI Embedded Workspaces use an XMLA endpoint to support open platform connectivity for Microsoft and third-party client apps and tools. Recall that workspaces use the XMLA for analysis or XMLA endpoints for communication between client apps and the Power BI workspace, and it's only available for querying the semantic model. Data sent over XMLA protocol, remember, is also fully encrypted by default, but you need to set the read-only connectivity for the premium capacity or premium per user semantic model workload to work with it. For applications to perform write operations, the XMLA endpoint property must be enabled for read-write by the admin. Note the steps listed here to enable the XMLA read-write. To connect to the workspace using this XMLA endpoint, you need to copy the workspace connection URL. Check out and know the connection requirements listed here to use XMLA endpoint 2 for the exam. Power BI desktop templates are used to help jumpstart and standardize report creation and can be used as a starting point for a new report layout, data model, and queries. Know the steps here to create templates using file to export and to update report templates using file to import. To create a PBIDS file or Power BI data source file to streamline the get data experience for new report creators. Know the 3 steps shown here under the Power BI data source to export or create the PBIS file. Lastly, recall that the Power BI semantic models represent a source of data that's ready for reporting and visualization. To share a semantic model to others, grant them access to it by sharing it from the Data Hub page or the Data Details page to users or groups, or even grant them access through the workspace. That's another really good option. Know how to create and update these reusable assets for the Power BI template and data source, and how to share the semantic model for the exam. Note also the progression of the steps, as this is a great candidate for an exam question where we ask you to put things in order. In this episode, we revisited how to implement security and governance and maintain the analytics development lifecycle. Be sure to go back over these sections and take some time to review the associated Microsoft URLs that will give you even more details to prepare for this exam. To prepare for the exam, focus on practice test questions and the sandbox simulation of the Microsoft exam available on the DP600 exam site. I also suggest reviewing all of the courseware for DP600 and all the associated labs. Remember, this group accounts for about 25 to 30% of the exam, so keep that in mind when preparing for the exam. Thank you for watching episode 1 on maintaining a data analytics solution. Be sure to join us for episode 2, where we will cover preparing data. Thank you for your time and attention, and I hope to see you in the next episode.